Okay, I'm here with Jessica Tanis, a career teacher. She is currently a teacher at Catalyst Maria in 10th grade English and writing. So Jessica, we're here to do our post-observation conference following my observation of you yesterday. So thank you so much for being here. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions, starting with what was a huge win that you saw during the lesson? How do you think it went?
I think the class went relatively well. I think a huge win is the investment that the students have with the text that we're reading,
Right.
As well as the structures that are in place for them to be successful when asked to reflect on the reading. So the structure of getting into groups and working collaboratively to get some ideas down to analyze what they've read.
Okay, excellent. Is there something in the lesson that you would change if you could do it again?
I would want to ensure that the students were a little bit more accountable for their own individual writing.
Okay.
And also, when I give them something like a worksheet in the beginning of the reading, they have a tendency to get the work done and then skim over some of the reading. In this particular situation, I didn't wait for the T-chart to be handed out because I thought it was useful for them to reflect as they read. But normally I like to give them their work at the end of the readings, which sort of forces them to do the complete reading first.
Great.
So the accountability of getting the reading down in addition to the work, not just reading for the answers.
Okay, excellent. And how do you feel the lesson went in terms of structure? The cultural structures, discipline structures, and then the reading structures that you touched on.
In terms of structure, I think it went well. We started off a whole class, which I like to do through model reading first. So they get a sense of what a good reader sounds like and the pacing that I have. And then we moved into some class reading, so they had the opportunity to read and get corrected and focused, and then finally moving into their more independent group work. So in terms of that structure, I liked that, going from kind of that model guided and then more independent. And in terms of the work itself, I thought the structure went well, where they know how to quickly get in and out of their groups, and what the expectations are in terms of participation for the activity.
Great, great. And just for my own learning, how do you ensure that scholar collaboration occurs as kids are reading?
Okay.
How do you have structures around, each person reading a certain amount, or how does that work?
So they have a sense of some freedom with how much each person has to read. The expectation is set in advance that they have to at least read a sentence, and that everyone has to at least read one time in the group. They also have the structure of the color-coded percentage cards where I've discussed with them before what an 80% means. I've prompted them on how to achieve a 90% or 100%, and in order to achieve those levels, they need to be taking turns reading, they need to have all eyes on text, and any conversations that they're having should be focused around issues that came up in the text, which I do encourage. In addition, on their worksheets, everybody's handwriting should be represented, and I go around and check with the groups to make sure that everybody's participating.
Great.
And those who are not currently writing should be looking in the book to help those who are writing.
Great, great. So I noticed yesterday you were focusing on characterization specifically, and I know, looking at your lesson plans, you have a gamut of skills that you look at. How do you use data to plan your lessons or inform your instruction?
Anytime we have a major standardized test, I look at the skills that they are struggling in the most, and that's what I use to base my question stems from. So then I look at the tests themselves to try to figure out that the language is very similar, so when it comes time for the test, they do well in that skill. If I don't have a standardized test, I also just take my own assessments of where they're struggling in either in their writing or their analysis and discussion of the book. In this case with the characterization, it's, how are we explaining the characters in the book other than he was a good guy, he was a bad guy. Because Knight has some characters with unique titles that they're not aware of, like the Lagerl test. So that might be, it's hard enough to remember who those people are, but then to characterize them in one way or another is important too. And it's just a general theme in the book is memory. And Elie Wiesel is able to remember these characters and these people that he met with. And I think that it's so important for him to relay that information that it's equally important then for the students to understand who these people were.
That's great. That's great. So So switching over to the writing a little bit, does your use of data change at all in what becomes a DOL skill versus what is reinforced through the actual writing of, let's say, an essay or a short writing prompt?
Did you say it changes based on the assessment?
Does it change? So looking at DOL versus, a writing prompt or an essay, do the skills change or are they cohesive throughout? And how do you choose those skills?
I think that they're pretty cohesive, but obviously as things arise, I'm flexible. We choose those skills based on what I've seen either in the writing or what weaknesses I've seen on the test. So for example, if they're struggling with organization, that's going to be something we'll focus on the DOL, but then on the rubric for the essay, there's an element of organization and unity on that for the assessment.
Great.
The same thing with grammar too. If they're struggling with, right now it's parallel structure, we're doing DOL, practice on it, and then application in the writing.
Awesome. It sounds like you use data really, really well. Do you ever look at data in terms of the different tiers in your room? I know you're in a co-taught setting, so do you find it easy to focus on tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 in writing an essay, and how might you go about doing that, or how do you do that?
So I'll use the tiers a lot of times for their seating charts to help support one another with reading of the novel when we're doing lit circles. I'll also use those tiers in writing where some students will get one type of graphic organizer and other students will get a different type of graphic organizer. And the more advanced will have more freedom, whether it's more independent writing without the examples that are as clearly laid out and organized on the graphic organizer. So essentially it's just different paperwork, but different ways of thinking on how to give some concrete approaches to organization for those who need it. So I guess to answer your question, both in seating arrangements structurally as well as some of the assignments that are given, I try to touch on those different tiers.
And I think you might have touched on this, but is that how you inspire scholars at all levels to stay engaged, or do you have other strategies for that?
I think that helps, sure. And then I also take the time for those who are struggling to try to find the things that they're doing great. And so I'll jot down a note on a Post-it, stick it on their desk, or just compliment, how focused they are. I try to be as specific as possible with my praise, so it's not just you did a good job today, but rather, I love how you participated several times in your lit circle, or, I think that it was a phenomenal use of the semicolon in your essays. And of course I have my good work on the back of the wall.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So switching areas a little bit with that motivation piece, even thinking about Carlos, who was in the back with, this poor little broken collarbone. Have you been able to leverage technology? We do have one-to-one iPads with scholars who have physical disabilities or unmotivated. Have you done that at all, or?
I think that is an area that I would like to improve on is, more use of the technology. Right now, of course, they're under maintenance, so they shouldn't be using the iPads. Right. In the case of Carlos, I have tried some different, ways of motivating him with trying to find text that he's engaged with. He is invested in Night, and I've seen a lot of growth with him with this book in terms of investment and staying awake and that sort of thing. Yesterday may have been an off day. In terms of technology, other than them being allowed to use it for research and maybe a little bit of music while they're writing, I haven't used it as much for motivation, but I would love to learn how. I think there's also that fear of sometimes it's not one-to-one if maintenance is getting done or if they're not to school on time. And so I like to use it more as like a group activities.
Awesome. Well, and we're going to put together an individual professional development plan based on the areas of growth, and so that's a fantastic thing to hear from you, and definitely something we can put into that plan so that you can continue to learn and grow from there. So we've talked a lot about data and a lot about motivating scholars to make sure that work's done. Do you have specific ways that you measure success on DOL skills other than scholar response? Just to give you the background, one of the things I noted is that we can only take so many kids answers, right? Is there another way? Do you grade for mastery on those, or how do you measure success?
For the DOLs?
Specifically for DOL.
I do grade for mastery. I usually start it just like anything else where it's more guided. So I won't necessarily take the first couple DOLs. It's more of practice. and then after, from their responses that I'm hearing that they're starting to understand more, and even by walking around the room and seeing that they're getting it more, then I will on a random day collect it and grade it to see, how are they actually doing. And then for the ultimate mastery, then of course is on those rubrics for the writing or over a test.
Okay, great. And this question is for English or writing. How do you challenge your lower level scholars, knowing that you've got, many scholars with learning disabilities in that class period, and your higher level scholars in each lesson or each unit?
I try to have some scaffolded questions,
Okay.
so some that will, that are a little bit more obvious, they have more obvious answers, in hopes of building the confidence of those who are a little, unsure of, or struggling students, but then also have more of the critical thinking, higher level questions for those who I want to push. In the past, I have also created different worksheets with different leveled questioning, depending on the level.
Great. Do you do a lot of exit slips? I noticed there wasn't one yesterday, but how do you track? I noticed that you led the period with the objective of the day, which was fantastic. How do you track scholars' understanding of that objective at the end of the day?
So usually there's something that needs to be turned in each class period.
Okay.
I like to track using things that are more individual. So for example, if we have a class that I'm guiding them through reading where they're stopping and jotting down answers, if I'm then going to discuss what those answers are immediately afterwards, I may not grade that assignment. Because while the purpose of the stop and jot is to get them to think and get ideas down first before sharing out, some of them do fall into the habit of not trusting if they're right or wrong, and so they just wait for the correct answer to be shared out. But today, for example, I did not go over the answers. I collected the stop and jots, and I will grade those because it's more of a reflection of their individual learning. So in terms of exit slips, I don't necessarily do your traditional, as you're walking out the door, last few minutes sort of thing. I have done it, and I do continue. It's just more of a sporadic basis, but I do check their individual mastery, usually with something throughout the day.
Great.
Some individual work.
Great. So there's so many phenomenal things that I saw during your lesson that, I've shared with you, just thinking about how you engage every single scholar, how you engage them in your text, how you have kids, reading and engaging every single class period. It's phenomenal to see. And, I also really liked how you model everything. I think that really helps the scholars understand exactly what is expected of them, but then giving them the freedom to, choose a different topic and work with it within what they know and what they're excited about, building that scholar interest. I also really noticed you making sure that every scholar had what they need. When Darnell and Carlin needed to kind of work alone because of what was happening with them today, you were very adaptable to it and just, clearly thinking about every single kid and what they need in your room, which is fantastic. And again, the skills focus that I saw was phenomenal. You have a clear driver towards the plan test, and are obviously using data to make sure that your kids are hitting the mark there. And obviously you had great growth last year, and there's no reason to expect any different next year, or this year actually. So one area that I wanted to ask is, where do you see as an area of growth for yourself? And this will, be a part of this conversation, and then also that professional development plan. I know you listed the iPad piece. Are there any other areas that you think you could benefit from some development in?
I think it never hurts to get more and more background and differentiation. I know in the beginning of the year we had some PD that even talked about simple solutions, like different questions to choose from that hit on different learning interests. And I tried that at the beginning of the year, and it just sort of, in the rush of day-to-day teaching, kind of got lost, and I would like to go back to that a little bit.
Great.
Because while I do try to have the scaffolded questions, and I do try to sometimes make the other worksheets, it's a lot of work, but to create just different questioning is not that much work.
Great.
So I guess I would like to push myself more in that arena.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. And actually, I have a copy of that PowerPoint.
Excellent.
And all of those materials that we got from the beginning of PD.
I think I have it too.
Do you? Okay, I
to
thought it
just
was a really
review
good
it.
one, so I was like, I'm gonna hang on.